Senator Wicker.
Well, thank you, Senator Cardin. And regrettably, I've been having to go in and out. It's a convenience that my office is right across the hall, but it also facilitates interrupting my ability to hear all of the witnesses. I assume, General Breedlove, you are still listening and part of this.
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay, well, it seems to me that your approach is starkly different from that of Dr. Kimmage, and I thought I would ask a question or two about that. You advocate, well, okay, let's go to the end game first. It seems to me that Dr. Kimmage believes this war cannot be won by either side. My hope has been that that actually Ukraine would eventually win and somehow would be able to expel the Russians from the territory that they've conquered. So, what is your view there? What is victory, and what is a satisfactory outcome in your view?
Senator, thanks for the opportunity. I do disagree a little bit with Dr. Kimmage, but then that's nuanced. How do you find a winner now after what's happened in Ukraine? Even if Ukraine is victorious at this point, the destruction of this country, the wanton criminality of this attack is just horrendous. So there, to say that there's a clear winner would be tough. But here's what I do believe. The world grossly misjudged the ability of the Ukrainian people to fight and misjudged their will, just like Mr. Putin misjudged both of those. And now we see a Ukrainian military that has held its own, well, and not only held its own, but has performed well against the Russians. And the Russians have made mistakes to facilitate that. But at this point, we're starting to see the Ukrainian military turn around and make some very serious threats to the Russian forces. So here is the outcome I would love to see. And that is that Mr. Putin's forces would culminate based on all of the supply and morale problems that they're having and their inability to be able to fight Ukraine on their terms. And then Mr. Putin either choose to cease work and try to sue for what he has in hand, or someone takes him from power in Russia and they sue for where they are in hand. But I think to the doctor's remarks, any conclusion at this point is not going to favor either side the way they want. And that's the main sticking point. I would never advocate for Ukraine having to give up any of the land that Mr. Putin has temporarily taken hold of. And I think that's going to be the major sticking point. But I've been a little bit rambling here. But, sir, I think that given more help from external sources, Russia could continue on and cause a lot more problems for Ukraine. If Ukraine is allowed to fight as it is now, they have a fighting chance.
Okay, I'm going to continue, if the chair will indulge me, with some questions for you, General, and then see if we can get some responses. Anti-ship missiles are, to you, an obvious next step to be provided by the United States and our allies to sink the Black Sea fleet. Of course, Russia is going to say this is escalatory. You also advocate sea mines, electronic warfare systems to deceive, mislead, jam, and direct and long-range precise fires, among others. So what do you say to people who say that would be an escalation and might lead to the use of chemical or nuclear weapons, or might involve the United States in a war against Russia? And then I'm going to ask you about the International Criminal Court.
Senator, Mr. Putin is introducing everything that he has to include supersonic missiles. He has changed tactics from trying to fight the military to his battle now is with the people of Ukraine. And so I guess my answer to you, sir, is not flippant or meant to be disrespectful, but Mr. Putin is introducing all manner of new kinds of weapons and capabilities. So then why is it escalatory when Ukraine enters, brings those same capabilities to the fore? And the reason that I push for coastal defense cruise missiles is because Ukraine asked for them early. They were denied and they really haven't come up again. But now we see Russia's fleet pounding Mariupol from the water and Russia's fleet preparing for the possibility of an amphibious landing nearby Odessa. So here is a Navy threatening the Army with these new asymmetric capabilities, and Ukraine is left without coastal defense cruise missiles. So I would just say there is no zero risk way forward, but Mr. Putin is not deterred from bringing new weapons to the fight. Why would we deny Ukraine the ability to defend their coasts?
And then, if I might, without prolonging this, how do you bring a charge of being a war criminal to how do you begin proceedings at this point before the International Tribunal?
Sir, I'm going to beg your forgiveness here. I'm not a lawyer. I would get that's one of those things I think NATO and our nation should be pursuing with the international courts and do it in the appropriate way. I don't think you need a whole lot more evidence than what we're watching every day. The ambassador talked about all the hospitals have been knocked down. We watched one of them in Mariupol happen on world TV screens. And I just don't think that if we had the right team of lawyers involved, this would be too hard to do. Sir, I'm sorry, I don't know the details.
Okay, Dr. Kimmage, there's a lot for you to respond to if you care to, so I'll give you an opportunity.
Well, thank you, Senator, so much for the question. I mean, I think that one thing that we can't do in this situation, to sort of pick up where the comments left off just a moment ago, is analogize to Yugoslavia in the 1990s and analogize Russia to Serbia. Russia is just vastly bigger. It's a nuclear power. We're not going to be able to do to Russia what we did to Serbia in that conflict. And so in terms of bringing Putin to justice, there's every reason to. The war crimes are rising as we speak, but unless we're able to defeat Russia and somehow, or the Russians overthrow Putin, he's going to stay behind that wall and be, I think, in many respects, impervious to those accusations. It doesn't mean that it's not good to make those accusations and to tabulate the names of Russian officers who commit war crimes and see what can be done. But it's not going to be Milosevic behind bars in The Hague at the end of this conflict, in my estimation. And just to go back to the first question that you asked, I mean, it's my prediction. I would love for General Breedlove to be correct that Russian soldiers might mutiny, that the Russian population would rise up and put an end to a war that will be devastating for Russia. I think that that's self-evident at the moment, and for that reason, Russia might really pull back not just from the territory that they've occupied since February 24th, but from Crimea. We could have what we've strived for since I was in the State Department in 2014, which is a Ukraine that has its full sovereignty, independence, and autonomy. But I think the law of averages suggests in this conflict, given that Russia's military is enormous, that they have all kinds of air power that they haven't used, they have lots of escalatory possibilities on their side, that Putin will not give up, and that he will not surrender, and that he will not back down, whatever that means in his terms. You know, I think there are lots of good reasons for Putin to come to the table and to negotiate, and there might be ways in the short term to do it. I think it's probably tricky, but my guess is that this conflict will end in a negotiated settlement, and it will be a dance, a long dance between Zelensky and Putin as to who's willing to compromise on which point. But Ukraine won't get everything it wants, and Russia won't get everything it wants, and it's really a question of time, and of course a question of what happens on the battlefield. But for Ukraine to expel Russian forces from its territory, you know, I'm not a military expert. I can't say what it would take in terms of what the U.S. would provide and what partners and allies of Ukraine would provide, but it just seems beyond what's really conceivable. And so that just points the arrow toward some kind of negotiated settlement at some point. That's my view of the conflict.
Mr. Chairman, it might be fair to ask Dr. Lanskoy if she'd like to weigh in about any of these issues.
Thank you. I guess I would just add that in addition, if we're speaking about war crimes, I would want to put Chechnya and Syria there as well.
Absolutely.
Among the cities that have been leveled and the kind of the whole range of atrocities that has gone on. But I also, you know, there are efforts to document these things, and there's already an ICC case opened on the Ukraine war, and there's efforts to document, and it's enormously important always to document and to seek proceedings, even if you can't ultimately carry it all out to the end, but at least you can establish what happened. And that will be, that is in itself enormously important, even if you can't get Putin himself behind bars or, you know, on the stand. And those, you know, those kinds of efforts, I think are very, very important. So we saw, for instance, some of the same military units and individuals engaged in Chechnya and then in the Donbass or in Georgia. Often the same individuals, often the same kinds of war crimes. So yes, I agree with what Dr. Kimmich just said in terms of it's hard to imagine Putin up there as on trial. Yet the possibilities of holding even lower level officials or military accountable, or even just having the records is very important.